I would say our building blocks start at the top. We take a top-down approach, and as many of you mentioned, most of your companies are legacy companies. And unfortunately, we had the habit of forming siloed teams, and that's our biggest roadblock. There are teams that also have silos within silos, and given that I said we start at the top, we start with architecture. And what I mean by silos within silos is that in architecture itself, you have application architecture and infrastructure architecture. That's the biggest mistake we've been making in the past, which we've absolved by combining the two. Why is that important? Because as most of you talked about migrating to the cloud and facing issues with refactoring applications, in the legacy world, each of those groups just had a view of their area, either infrastructure or application. By bringing them together, we brought the architects together to get a full end-to-end view of what the architecture looked for the application and eventually the product. That gave us a better idea of how to solution to problems that were being faced, what components to use, what components not to use, and most importantly, what components we could successfully retire from the legacy world. So to us, for Sun Life, the biggest success has been bringing those two together, getting them to work cognitively and collaboratively together, avoiding the finger pointing off it. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. The developers always blamed the infrastructure, and the infrastructure team always blamed the developers, but helped us to get past that and helped us to get to a more healthy situation where we can actually identify apps, legacy apps that could be migrated to the cloud. And again, I think some of you touched on this. It's not a lift and shift anymore like it used to be, but spend the time to refactor the app, to utilize the capabilities and features that things like the cloud or the platform you're migrating to has. And obviously, you're using modern techniques, modern technology, and those platforms are designed for you to be digital. So leverage those, but start from the top with architecture.
Andre kind of stole some of my thunder here because I was going to get into architecture as well. But we're a little bit more fortunate at Home Trust. We went through, we're just finished off our 4-year transformation. So most of our tooling is all modern tooling, and we are almost 100% cloud. Of course, we'll never be 100% just because of the networking equipment that's in our localized facilities and so on where we need to manage, but we are pretty much cloud. And with the tooling, it's never been a tooling problem, or even for modern development. It's the fact that there is velocity that's required from a business perspective, and IT needs to meet it. And if we never underestimate the involvement that you need from the business to have that happen. So for us, and Andre spoke to this, architecture was one of the key components of this. For us to be able to see exactly what applications were where, at what state they were in. Is it something that is technical debt for us? It also it created this ability for us to navigate that and really make the estimations and assumptions of how long something would take to get developed. Investment in this area would helped us considerably. So we were able to see a blueprint of everything that does exist for us today. Then you layer on your DevOps practices. Of course, we're maturing that like everybody else is. Because we have adopted cloud, there are practices that makes us more efficient there. And we also changed the mindset as we started to build this way, because everything is at a cost now. You're subscribing to everything and everything is metered. So when you start making these decisions, you want to look for reusability. You want to look for ways of building things that can scale. And if you can't do it that way, then you have to get the right decisions in place to do that. So having all those pieces in place are extremely important, but it's led by a strong design team. And then once you see the design team, and the other portion that was already mentioned is automation, and automation is important in certain factors, but Charles also mentioned is interpretive tasks, but we call that higher value tasks here. We want to get all the stuff that's cookie cutter activities to be automated. And those, I know there's another discussion further on in our session today, but those are areas that we need to work on as well. And the last piece for us is citizen development. We've started that journey as well. Modern development is not just an IT function. We want to engage and enable the business to be able to start developing the things that they need with the tools that we provide. And we started that with the Power BI side of things, maybe smaller for some of you, but report building and analytics has now been pushed out to the business where they're able to use their tooling to do that.
With Pizza, we've been on the application modernization for the last, we could say, 5 years. What we've done is we hyper-focus a lot on customers. So it's a good thing Jeff talked about the app, that most of us probably are using the app. And part of our strategy when we were thinking about application modernization is how long will it take? That's coming from the business, and how much it's going to cost. And a lot of us talk about lift and shift may not be the best way to go about doing things. So one of the things that we have looked at is, if we're going to the cloud, what do we need to do? What are some of the languages we're going to choose to develop in? What are the skill set we need? Because if you're thinking on-prem, we own both of our data center. We have our own developer in-house. All of our application is built by us. We're not using any off-the-shelf application. So how do we take this knowledge, convert it in a brand new code into the cloud, and where do we get the skill set from? So those were actual concerns. And of course, the business looking down and says, well, how long is this going to take and how much it's going to cost us to do? So we started our journey to start coding in 2016, and we didn't launch our website until 2019. And then our apps in December of 2019. So that's our Pizza brand. We have a second brand called Pizza 73. So we learn a lot from that, and being in the cloud is great. There's a lot more to do in the cloud, and just to let everyone know, it's not the cheapest solution to be in. It's not cheaper than being on-prem. Also, you have to think about security. It's a different layer of security you're doing. So initially, if you're in a hybrid, you're having two platforms, a cloud platform and an on-prem platform. So we take those learning, we measure our security, we set up our security, we have managed security, we ensure that customer, whether it's one customer or 10,000 customer, they don't see any degradation in terms of performance or speed. And then we take that learning and we were able to do the same for our Pizza 73 partners. So we are JVC at Pizza 73. They're mostly in Western Canada, predominantly in Alberta. If you guys ever go into Alberta, you'll see Pizza 73 there. So we took those learnings, and instead of taking 3 years to build that system, it took us 1 year to revamp their entire website and apps. And this past January, we were able to take those learnings and putting into the cloud. And today we're in cloud for both of our e-commerce platform.
At Minto Group, we don't have huge development team. We are rather small. We are focusing on integrations. We've gone through quite a bit of transformation over the past 3-4 years, 2 new ERP implementations, and a few other satellite systems around those. Integrations seem to be definitely a focal point at this time. It's a combination, to answer your question, Jeff, it's a combination, of course, of staying current technology-wise and making sure that all the business requirements are being met, and managing the change, because we have been having a lot of change. So we're trying to keep the right balance between all of that. To do that, we start with a roadmap. So we're trying always to roadmap everything to build a high-level vision and architecture before making any technology changes. I can relate with some of what Henry said about Power BI. We have been doing a lot of work with Power BI and Power Apps as well, general Power Platform. And a lot of that work has been moved into the business teams, right? So we're democratizing Power Platform development, and at the same time educating and bringing people from different business areas into the mix.
Our environment's a little bit similar to Anca as well. And I think, less on the app development side, but I think what I'm looking at more is from an integration and building really that ecosystem. I think the one thing that I'm kind of looking at and doing is, as part of the digital transformation journey, it's really starting with the categorization and the prioritization analysis. So essentially, whether it is infrastructure, workplace, application, or security, really, and from an application perspective, we're really putting them into three buckets. Either it's a repaint, a renovate, or replace, and the latter being, the most complex, the most resource intensive, which requires a complete overhaul, and you're really going to be a cloud native development from that perspective. So to kind of navigate that piece and the technical architecture effectively, the various building blocks and the best practices should be considered. So, whether it's a modular design, to break the applications into smaller reusable components. Embracing microservices is another one. Containerization, which is going to be key and core to your cloud native approach as well. And then the whole view about process, which is i.e. agile development approach with feedback loops. I think that's also going to be very critical should be adopted. And then latter part, as Henry said, you can transition into DevOps as well as supporting that next gen of platforms and tools to accelerate that development, I would say. I think the last but not least is from an infrastructure component, think through with serverless compute, prioritizing security by design. Obviously, as being a CISO, we want to be able to do that. But really the building of the new applications, it's really an ongoing journey, and it's ever changing. We need to always catch up. But I think it is more of a journey of demanding continuous learning and improvement rather than it's a one-time event.
One of the things that we see is that we can try to do that big bang approach. We can do the lift and shift. We can modernize while we're, making the upgrades. But the reality is, I think we have to take a crawl, walk, run approach. And the way we've seen this as successful is actually by empowering every part of the team. So by getting everyone engaged early, making sure security has a seat at the table, the infrastructure team has a seat at the table, the devs, the ops, everybody comes together, and you actually empower those people to work together in a platform. Now we don't have infighting. And so you really get that ability to move forward quickly because you come to agreement and you don't have that fighting later. And I think part of that is we have to think about this with the end in mind. If we go and start reaching our velocity goals first without thinking of governance, security, and quality, we're going to find ourselves rather stuck when it comes toward the end of that. And then I think lastly is making sure that we make it easy for people to do the right thing and hard for them to do the wrong thing. If we don't put policy in place, if we don't make sure that everyone's playing by the exact same rules, right now we have a struggle, and it's a constant tug of war. By creating a standard set of rules, by creating a policies of how we actually get to production and how this actually moves, regardless of which applications they are, now we can actually start operating together.